With the increasing scale of foreign students now in the UK, a controversial industry that has existed for decades is also booming. Companies that write your essays for you. Some say it is nothing but a legitimate essay help service. Others say it is cheating.
Contract cheating takes place when a student uses someone else to complete their academic work for them. It might be a friend, it might be a family member, it might be someone they're paying to do that work.
Some of the biggest UK essay writing services receive nearly 20,000 customers per company per year. Although many claim that they are only providing example essays, they say over 60% of their customers are from abroad. An Australian survey found
Students who spoke a language other than English at home were much more likely to use these services.
According to the Freedom of Information request collected by The Guardian, cheating soared by 40% from 2014 to 2017 in Russell Group universities. Comparing to the home students, there are more international students caught in the system.
Various surveys have found are that international students are disproportionately represented in those results. So there's a lot more international students than you would expect.
Some countries like the US and Ireland have outlawed the advertisement of the service, but it has done very little to help.
You only need to Google a couple of key terms for homework help or paper writing help, and you'll find everything you need. Whether it's being formally advertised or not, the truth is it's as easy as it's ever been for customers and services to connect.
And many of these services have special targets.
So in 2018, there were more than 500,000 emails sent to Chinese student inboxes in the UK.
So why there are consistently a large amount of international students choose ghost essay writers, and how universities and lecturers can help. To find out the factors that might have led some international students to engage in contract cheating, I spoke with Dr. Raphaelin, the Associate Dean of Education and the Chair of the Academic Misconduct Panels at City University London. She deals with dozens of students accused of contract cheating every year and has spent a lot of time investigating the motives behind their actions.
That it must be incredibly difficult to study overseas for lots of complex reasons. First of all, you're having to engage in an educational system that is very different from that which you're used to. There are all sorts of psychological and well-being issues that must be faced by international students. They're potentially quite isolated. They are away from their normal support structures. There must be huge investment made by a family overseas to send their young person to study in the UK. So there is that weight of expectation of not letting families down that potentially could lead people to fear failure and make poor choices around contract cheating. And I would say the access to information and communication technologies is very different now than it used to be. So somebody who's coming from overseas has access to a large range of academic and non-academic communities that may impact upon the choices they make in terms of their educational journey.
But for international students, are they simply using ghost essay writers as an escape in order to achieve similar results as their home students? Professor Liu, a Chinese ethnic Malaysian who came to study in the UK at the age of 19, has been teaching global business management for over 30 years.
Having taught across 5 different universities, you do find that the capability of the international students are very different and very diverse. But the majority do struggle. From my experience, I found that students don't like to cheat. No international student has worked hard to come to the United Kingdom to risk everything to be called a cheat.
Yeah.
And what organizations or universities in particular have to do is to recognize that problem of what happens to the students' mindset.
Those who have used ghostwriting companies do not like talking about it. Most are afraid they might be punished by their universities and even lose their qualifications. I spent weeks trying to find a ghostwriting customer to speak, but gained nothing. Eventually, I got some luck getting to know one amongst my friends. I can't use his real name, but he agreed to go on camera as a former Russell Group student.
I was an international student just arrived at the UK. But the course started straight away. There was no transition period for me. Although my language had met the requirements, I wished I could have a foundation course. So without it, we went straight into the study and assignments, and I was very slow in reading and writing. At that time, I had a lot of pressure because all my assignments were due in the time frame of 10 days, and I was completely occupied by other IC. And so with less than 3 days for the assignment, I really have no choice.
Was the results good? Did you use it again afterwards?
Yeah, I think the results are overall 60%. I think it's quite good. Contract cheating is really hard to be found out, but I didn't use it after the first term because I gradually adapted to the study and life. And the essay writing service is too expensive, so I didn't use it after the first term.
If it's cheaper, would you use it more?
Actually, I think I can do it.
Like Jimmy, international students are often confronted with challenges of adapting to study in the UK, the language, and the time management during the busy essay submission weeks. Professor Liu explained the reasons behind it.
If I could group my response to you in 3 categories, I think the first of which is the adaptation. When I first came to do A-levels here, the challenge for me was to try and understand some of the terms that my teachers would use, like for example, widgets. For a very long time, I couldn't figure out what a widget was. And then when I went to university, it was worse. They were still using widgets. The second category is really very much to do with the expectation of IELTS. As you know, IELTS is measured through 4 different categories. Most international students, they see IELTS as the ceiling. For example, to come into our undergraduate programs, you need to have IELTS 6, 6.5. And if the student sees IELTS as 6.5 as the ceiling, they may acquire IELTS 6.5. But their English is still weak. So when they come into study here in the United Kingdom, they don't really take into account that actually that is not the ceiling. That's the minimum you need to benefit from the educational processes here in the United Kingdom. The final thing, I think there are some very quick fixes that are available. Don't allow the assessments to bunch. Usually there is a lot of bunching coming together because tutors like to assess towards the end of the program rather than midway through. And what happens with bunching is students are then put under more pressure. And if you already take into account that one of the drivers towards using essay mills is because students are not able to do everything within that fixed period of time.
Austin, not his real name, who is also a recent graduate from a Russell Group university, asked to remain anonymous. He was struggling with understanding what was being requested of a university essay.
When I first attended university, I received my very first essay, and I don't really know how to write it. So when I read the question, I don't really understand it, and I don't really know how to answer it. And then in addition, because I was studying law back in university, it was a law essay, which I believe there's a lot of requirements regarding citations and its format and structures. I don't know how to write the law essay. So that is why I decided to go to the essay writing service to seek their help.
What service your university could have provided you so you will have felt more confident in writing it by yourself?
To be honest, back in university, I didn't attend a lot of lectures, but I do go to the seminars. Despite that, I don't think they provide a lot of support regarding essay writings. I believe if the professors put some essay templates and examples online, that would help me a lot, especially for those like me who doesn't know about the structures and how to cite when they first began law school. More is that we didn't have academic advisors at that time, and I wasn't familiar with my lecture because I wasn't too active in attending the lectures and seminars. So I didn't get the chance to ask the lecturer anything. So I feel I was just on my own at the beginning of my university life.
Were you satisfied with the result? Did you use it again?
No, I actually wasn't too happy about the result because I actually failed that essay. I didn't even get a 40. When I go to the service, they guarantee me I would get a 60, but then which I didn't. So that's why I wouldn't, and I didn't use the service again.
Austin was not alone in terms of not being able to fully engage in classes and not really understanding the essay questions. Professor Liu pointed out what lecturers can do in order to help international students perform better.
There are two areas that universities and lecturers and all can do is firstly to try and make sure that the participation element in class, whichever mode of instruction the tutors are using, that the students are engaged.
Due to international students' English learning styles, many find it difficult to follow and engage in seminars and lectures, especially in their first year.
Most international students, whilst they perform very well, for example in IELTS, they don't perform very well in the areas that are most critical during the process of learning. The other aspect of it is that a combination of not really understanding the question and then not attending or paying attention during seminars, or they absent themselves because they're embarrassed. Most importantly is what the tutors can do, the style of questions that they put forward, and actually spend time working with the students to measure or gauge the expectation of the student. Okay? Most of the students I work with always think it's easy to do the question until they start doing it. And then they realize they don't have enough time because the time management aspect is then not properly implemented.
After listening to what Professor Liu has said, apparently international students share the same struggles, and they often lack special consideration and support from their lecturers. With my hope to have these things changed, I wonder what universities have been doing to tackle this issue.
There is always a lag between a phenomena being identified and change and action coming, really. I would say that over the last few years, there's been a real concerted effort by universities to take a very holistic approach to how academic misconduct, particularly contract cheating, is being dealt with. And so I suppose universities are focused on work around teaching and learning. How can they develop assessment? How can they ensure that induction best supports a range of students? How can they ensure that support for those for whom English is not a first language is improved, and that direct contact between staff and students, which is so important? How can we ensure that policies and procedures are tightened up? I would say the most important thing that we're seeing a shift in is a move towards more student support, a recognition that students need increased contact with academic staff. Universities need to invest more time in designing assessments that are more authentic, that will make it less likely that a student will engage in cheating because it isn't worth it, to improve the quality of staff and student relationships so that students feel more invested and don't want to cheat.
Dr. Rafalin made it clear that universities have been working harder to implement relevant strategies. But at the same time, when it comes to international students' day-to-day studies, lecturers still have a lot to improve. The heavy bunch of assessments remains an issue, and many are still unable to follow lectures or engage in seminars. Professor Liu calls for teachers to shift their mindsets in order to make international students feel less of a need to use essay writers.
Firstly, there has to be a sea change in the mindset of the students as well as the teachers and the institutions.
International students have to pay over £20,000 a year solely for their study in the UK. However, having an experience studying abroad is highly valued by many of their employers back home.
Students need to take up the responsibility to understand that it is cheating if they go and ask someone to do a piece of work for them. Then I think universities and teachers also need to understand that students are always going to be under pressure. Okay? And if you then do not have an assessment pattern that actually tries to support the critical thinking development of the student rather than just regurgitating facts, then that will always be, I think, a problem that cannot be resolved. We need to recognize that for the international students that are coming to study here in the United Kingdom, there has been a lot of sacrifices that have been made by their families, their sponsors. And therefore, any opportunity that they are faced with where, you know, if they don't go to an essay writer because they can't get the essay done, then that becomes for them fair play, because the alternative is to fail. And I do not believe any student comes to the United Kingdom to study to fail.